Right. So, hello everybody, and welcome to Creativity Lab. Great to see so many of you. This is season 1, episode 3. I've made it sound all Netflixy there, haven't I? But I thought it's got quite a nice ring to it. So for those that are new to Creativity Lab, thank you for joining. Great to see you. The whole purpose behind Creativity Lab, which Andy Lambert, who I'll get to introduce himself in a moment, and I came up with a couple of months ago now, was to create some new learning opportunities that A, were free, but B, a little bit different to anything else that was out there. So for the first episode 1, we had Doncaster Council, which was fun. And episode 2, we had 3 creative agencies, one of whom was Alan Oram from Alive with Ideas, who literally just popped up on my screen, almost like magic, just as I said that. Alan, great to see you.
You too.
Thanks for joining. Both of those episodes are on the Comms 2.0 website, so they're on the toolbox section, and I called it Catch Up TV because I just thought it sounded good. Today's edition will be on there as well. I'll put that up over the weekend. So if you've got colleagues who you think would be interested and get some value out of today, please do point them towards that page. I'll also send a link out to everybody that's signed up. So yeah, we've got 90 of you on the call. So hopefully you've all got coffee on the go and lunch. Feel free to tuck in as you're listening away. So I think when we started thinking about who we wanted to have on Creativity Lab, I mean, where do you start? There's so many talented people out there in our industry that, you know, you could run one every week, to be perfectly honest. But we wanted to get some people that maybe you'd not heard from before, to get some different perspectives, some different learning. And as I say, the whole point is for us all to be able to learn from one another. But I think when Andy Lambert and I were chatting, we always wanted to have a session on storytelling and narrative. And they're such buzzwords, aren't they? I hear it, you know, organisations that I work with in the day job, I hear it a lot from senior managers, from chief execs, from leaders, from MDs. We need a narrative, we need a story. And yeah, you absolutely do. But it's become a bit of a buzzword, isn't it? And I wonder if there's some myths have built up around what is a story and what is a narrative and what's the difference. So I think when we began thinking about who would be really great to have on this, very quickly we came up with Jude and Andy from NHS Digital, because I'm aware of the brilliant work that they've been doing, and we'll get them to introduce themselves in a minute and tell us a little bit more. But I think this is fertile ground, and I think the very fact we've got nearly 100 people on a Friday lunchtime does show actually that there's a lot of appetite around how do we tell stories. You know, we're working in such, you know, busy, complex, noisy world, aren't we, that to get your messaging across and to get it to land and to engage with people, it's really difficult, and there aren't necessarily any quick shortcuts. But today what we're going to have is a really interactive session, tons of advice, tons of learning, where hopefully you'll be able to take away some tips and things that maybe you can try at work next week. So as I say, before we hand over to Jude and Andy, Creativity Lab is a collaboration with Content Cal, and we've got Andy Lambert, my glamorous co-host, joining us today. Andy, would you like to say hi and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'll be very quick because the other Andy and Jude are the stars of this show. But yeah, I'm Andy. I'm one of the founders of a company called Content Cal, it's a content marketing platform. But the reason that I wanted to partner with Darren in doing this is that, like, you know, having spent my life as a content marketer myself, creativity is the single thing that differentiates mediocrity from something that succeeds. So it's been an absolute privilege to work with Darren to get such brilliant people as part of these labs to share such incredible expertise. So yeah, thrilled to be part of it. So with that, Jude, do you want to do a bit of an intro?
I will share my screen first, if that's all right. First hurdle, let's get that over the way. If somebody could let me know if they can see that. Yep, cool, good, that's working. That's a good omen. We'll kick off then, Andy, other Andy.
Yeah, hi guys. So you've heard a very small bit about us from Darren already. But no offense to Andy Lambert, but we thought that introducing yourselves is slightly difficult and slightly cringy for ourselves anyway, from our perspective. So we thought we'd go down a different route and introduce each other.
So yeah, so obviously that's Andy.
That's not me.
No, that's he's worked in public and private sector comms and marketing for around 20 years, and he is also a published author, including 8 novels, and I have even read them all. He's also written 4 books about football, which I absolutely haven't read. He hails from Manchester, and he's got 2 kids, Leon and Peggy. His favourite storyteller is Stephen King. His favourite story is Life of Pi, and his favourite cinematic story is a tie between Stand By Me or Goodfellas.
And obviously that's Joe Pesci, but that's Jude. So with 20 years of award-winning NHS comms experience under her belt, she's regarded as one of our finest NHS comms professionals. She said if I said that, she was going to give me a tenner. Anyway, joking. Her roots are in Somerset, even if her accent isn't. And she's got 1 daughter, Trixie, and that means her current favourite storyteller is, of course, Julia Donaldson. Her favourite retro story is Some Like It Hot, and her favourite TV story is The Wire. I wish I'd said The Wire too.
Yeah. For a fun bonus fact about Andy and I, we were at the same university at the exact same time, doing almost the exact same degree, but we never met, or at least if we did, we certainly don't remember it. And now we are both happily employed by NHS Digital, who are based in Leeds. So, why in our cringeworthy intros are we telling you about our favourite storytellers? Well, essentially, I guess that's what we all do, isn't it? Us communicators, like Darren said, we tell stories. Stories that engage, inspire, change attitudes, change behaviours, build loyalty, or get people to take a particular action. Whatever your end game in a piece of comms, you need a decent story or a narrative. But what makes a good story? What makes a good narrative? So we are going to turn to some friends for some help with that. Pixar.
Yeah, I love a Pixar movie, and it's not just because I've got kids and it gives me some peace for a cheeky snooze on a Sunday afternoon. Pixar tell great stories. They're arguably one of the greatest storytellers of our generation. They've made 24 films in total. Can we have a go between us of seeing how many we know? So when I say go, can you please post the name of a Pixar film that you know in the chat? Let's see how many we could get. Oh, blimey, they're flying. Whoa, that's incredible.
I mean, we have given you a bit of a clue with this image, but if anyone was stuck.
Oh my God.
This was your bit, Andy. I was like, Andy, you can...
I can't even read them. They're coming in so quickly. Okay, I think I'll give it another sort of 10 seconds or so. And then I'm going to ask some of the obscure ones because I've not seen it, and just let me know if you got them. Because there were 2 or 3 on this list that neither of us had ever heard of, let alone seen. So, right, okay, I'll stop it now. So the 3 on the list that I've not seen flashing past were The Good Dinosaur, which actually my little boy has watched, and I've seen bits of it, and it's absolutely awful. Luca, mainly because it's just released, and I'm trying to think the third one. I think Onward was one for me, but I'm reliably told that my little boy's seen that a lot. But yeah, when I showed him the list, he knew all of them. Anyway,
good job.
Rango, is that one?
Oh, Rango might be actually.
Okay, well,
the one about the wizard. Whoever's called that one out, yeah, it's a good shout. It's quite good.
Well, anyway, you all did absolutely brilliant on that, so give yourselves a pat on the back. We could probably just sack off this presentation actually and just talk about which of these is the best movie. But actually, let's just get back on track, shall we, Jude?
Okay, I'll try. Okay, so why Pixar movies? Well, Pixar tell great stories. As Andy's already said, Pixar are one of the greatest storytellers of our generation. Their films have grossed billions of dollars and won tons of awards. Each one is different, it's unique, it's memorable. But did you know they use the same narrative formula, the same narrative DNA every single time? And this is it. So once upon a time there was, every day this happened, then one day this, because of that, until finally this happened, and ever since then. So it's pretty basic, isn't it? It's pretty simple. And you'd think that their films might then be a bit the same, a bit repetitive, a bit formulaic, but I'm not sure that's how any of us would describe a Pixar movie, because formulas and story structures for storytelling work. And I'm quite sure I don't need to tell a bunch of communicators this, but you've got to nail your key messages and your narrative before you can get creative with it. This one's my favorite, by the way, Coco. Makes me cry every time. Anyway, narrative has become a bit of a buzzword lately. I think Darren said that in the intro and couldn't agree more. And really, it's just a fancy way of saying storytelling. Strategic narrative somehow sounds even worse. But again, as Darren said, execs love it. And after the work that we've been doing over the last year or so, Andy and I are definitely the strategic narrative wankers of NHS Digital. Anyway, narrative and storytelling. You may have no idea where to begin with this. You may be thinking you don't have time to work on narratives. You've just got to bang stuff out, because we've all been there. But as our very own Darren will often argue, you've got to make time for creativity. You've got to find a way to carve it out. And creative storytelling isn't about sitting around on beanbags and pontificating as you come up with your very best ideas. It can often be a bit more scientific than that, and it needs a structure behind it, or dare I say, a formula. But is that going to dampen your creativity then, to have a structure for storytelling, just like Pixar do? Well, Shakespeare had one. Tried and tested, I think we can probably say pretty successful. Tarantino has a structure for storytelling, very distinctive, very different, but you know a Tarantino movie by the fact it basically begins at the end. And before I move on, I just need to give credit to these last two slides to a company called Three Monkeys, because I nicked them from them, but they're both brilliant examples of storytelling structures. Anyway, Andy, back to you.
Yeah, okay. So why are we here today? And I'm not asking a philosophical question here. I'm talking like the basics. Well, in the next 20 minutes or so, we hope to instill in you a belief that structure can bring consistency to storytelling, and it doesn't dampen creativity. So we're going to show you why narrative matters, the tools and techniques we've used, and how to make some quick changes using these tools to the way that you approach basic copywriting. By the end of it, you'll have some tricks up your sleeve to put into practice. So let's say you're starting a new campaign or a project or a strategy or a rebrand, whatever it is you need to achieve in your day job. Why do you even need a narrative? Well, because consistency and repetition matters. It's how you embed key messages into the minds of your target audience. We need to say it simply and say it often. In today's noisy, frenetic, competing surroundings, it's really important for everyone to keep to a consistent message. After all, repetition means retention. That's what all the research tells us. Now, it's often said that good communications is an art. It's also a bit of a science. Jude and I have developed a now tried and tested method to build our narratives, to give us a structure for storytelling. Just like Pixar, Shakespeare and Tarantino, though with nowhere near the same salaries. And I was going to say a little less of the swearing than Tarantino too, but if anyone sat in on a meeting with me and Jude, or even just before this meeting, they'd probably disagree. Anyway.
It's off in bed.
So stop heckling. We've combined a couple of models, which we're now going to show you. Before I do though, I just wanted to add that this isn't the way you have to do this. There are tons of different ways and this may not work for you, but this is how we built our structure. So firstly, we approach our narrative work by starting with the why.
So I hope that some of you will already be familiar with Simon Sinek's Golden Circle. There's an amazing TED talk on this, which is one of the most watched of all time. It's only about 17, 18 minutes. So if you haven't seen it, definitely look it up. But the Golden Circle is based on the principle that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So this taps into a bit of our brain that's known as the limbic bit, that's responsible for emotions and feelings. So if you're feeling love, fear, envy, sadness, lust, that's your limbic brain in action. And it's also a part of the brain that's responsible for processing decision-making. And that's why it's so powerful when messages communicate with that bit of someone's brain first before they engage their rational bit of the brain. So get them feeling something first or reacting to a feeling. And it's this feeling that will then influence their decision-making or their response to your call to action. So we've used this model extensively when talking to our colleagues about what they or our organisation is actually here to do. So we begin with why, which is our purpose, what's our motivation, and what do we believe in? Then we move on to the how, the process. So these are the actions that we take to achieve our why. And only then, finally, do we say what we do, the result of the why. And the theory is that too many companies and people start with what they do as opposed to why they do it. And people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So we've then combined Sinek's Golden Circle with another model called the 2793 model. So this is a way of producing key messages that originated from research in the US. And let's face it, if you look at politics as an example, the Americans know a thing or two about the strength of repetition. So with this model, the aim is that each set of key messages are no more than 27 words, which can be said in 9 seconds and contain the magic number for communicators, which is 3. And this was based on their research that found that the average length of a quote in print media is 27 words. The duration of a soundbite in broadcast media is 9 seconds, and the average number of messages carried is 3.
So when we overlay Sinek's Golden Circle onto this model, it means our key messages then give us the why, the how, and the what. Together, this gives us what's sometimes known as the elevator pitch. These are the messages that we'll use the most often then. Underneath each of these are the supporting messages. These back up and provide evidence for the key point. And again, they form up to 27 words. Now, this discipline of sticking to 27 words is really hard, believe me, but it really helps you to get to the very heart of what needs to be heard. And to be fair, it stops people turning it into 27,000 words, which as communicators we all know about. I'm sure we've all been there.
So I first came across the 2793 method when I headed up comms in a frontline NHS trust and was developing a narrative for a staff wellbeing campaign, which was called #AllOfUs. This campaign eventually picked up an HSJ award for comms. And if you're in healthcare, you'll know just how hard the HSJ awards are to bag. And I credit a huge part of its success to the messaging structure that I put in place using the 2793 method. And our evaluation showed very high levels of key message recall amongst staff, which, let's face it, is often the holy grail of campaigning. So when I came to NHS Digital, I brought that method with me and then used it for a very challenging zero budget campaign to get people downloading the NHS app. We almost won a national award for that work, but like so much else, COVID robbed us of the chance. But it is worth saying that the NHS app has now had unprecedented growth in downloads, which I am entirely crediting to my original campaign and absolutely nothing to do with the fact the app now holds your COVID pass, which is the new name for your COVID record, by the way, hot off the press. And obviously that could be our passport to freedom, but clearly it was my campaign that got everybody downloading it. Anyway, when Andy and I started looking at strategic narrative for NHS Digital, we struck upon this notion of using the 2793 model with the Senec Golden Circle. And we quickly realised we found something that would work for our organisation, provided some much needed structure, but absolutely without stifling creativity.
Now, Jude chose the image for this slide. I might have chosen a slightly different one. I'd have chosen one that didn't have the current speaker sitting with his back to the camera and his bald spot on show for all. I never knew I had a bald spot until I took part in this photo shoot. Back in the days when we were allowed to sit around a table together, eh? Remember that? Anyway, because we're dealing with a pandemic last year and supporting comms for some very high profile tech programs wasn't enough, we also decided it was a good time to kick off a strategic narrative project. I know, we're idiots, but it does mean we can talk you through an example developed for our product development directorate at NHS Digital. This directorate has a vast array of products from 111 Online to the NHS app that Jude mentioned earlier, COVID vaccinations booking service, nhs.uk website, cancer screening systems, and the Child Protection Information Service. Lots of different programs and products, and a desire for a unifying, overarching narrative from programs that often work in silos. So we had a whole host of source materials to start off with, and most importantly, we reflected the way this directorate works by developing the narrative collaboratively with their staff, continuously learning from each iteration. Now, NHS IT isn't necessarily the sexiest of topics. Shh, don't tell our colleagues, especially not the lovely Andrea, who fixed both of our laptops when we were having a massive panic this week before this presentation. And Andrea, incidentally, describes himself as an Avenger, which isn't on our film list. Anyway, in our roles, we do always try and find the golden thread back to the front line, to clinicians and to patients. So sit back, relax, and we'll tell you a short story.
We believe in improving lives through data and technology. People are at the heart of our work. Patients, clinicians, staff, our friends, and our family. We must enable the best use of scarce NHS resources, whether that's time, money, or staff. Technology helps our NHS improve and provide better care. We uncover user needs to fully understand complex problems. We use modern techniques to learn and adapt at pace, and we focus on successful outcomes. We pay continuous attention to technical excellence and good design. What do? We craft products and services that deliver better outcomes. What we craft is useful, inclusive, easy to use, and easy to adopt. Technology can change lives. We empower people, enabling them more direct control. And we're proud that our products benefit individuals and the wider system. We are NHS Digital.
Well, that was a brilliant audition for the next voiceover artist for the M&S adverts. Anyway, now Jude's finished her best Jackanory storytelling. Let me show you how this was all put together. You can see all the messages sitting on this grid. All the narrative grids for our organisation begin with the same cornerstone, our why. We believe, I can't say it in the M&S voice, we believe in improving lives through data and technology. This is what we believe in its simplest form. It's why NHS Digital exists. Using it across all our narratives gives us consistency. You can then see each of the columns representing the top key message and supporting messages for the why, the how, and the what. So put it all together and we have a narrative, which is what you just heard. You can see all the joining words in italics just to give you an idea of how it can be put together. The joining words and sentiments used around the key messages depend on the story we're telling, who we're telling it to, and what we want them to think, feel, or do as a result. Of course, the language you'd use to tell a story to fellow techies would be very different to telling a story to patients, but the basic narrative formula for the story stays the same.
Before I move on to the next slide, I am just going to give a shout out to one of my magnificent colleagues, Mr. Paul Butler, who I know is on this call because I saw his video pop up earlier. Paul is the comms genius behind our product development directorate, and he's taking forward this narrative as a key part of his strategic approach. One day I'm going to force Paul to blog about it. In fact, I might write it into his PDL for next year so that you all get to hear a bit more about how we're then bringing this to life. Paul is a modest but brilliant comms supremo and would also give Darren a run for his money for the title of nicest man in comms. Andy absolutely is not in the running for that title. Anyway, it's probably why we get on so well. So this product development narrative that we've just shown you was one of several that we developed for NHS Digital. We're nowhere near finished on this, and the project has hit quite a few barriers thanks to COVID and the never-ending barrage of work that it's brought with it. Every time we think we're not going to get another massive tech thing coming in for COVID, boom, something hits like the booking service or the COVID pass. But anyway, we did, however, get the chance to run a session with our wider comms team to talk them through the process that we used and get them used to using our new narratives. And the very best way to get your team engaged is always with a bit of friendly competition. So we thought we'd play you a short video clip of this team session, but honestly, we just haven't had the reliable laptops this week or the technical jiggery-pokery of getting a recorded team session off our internal system, edited, re-uploaded. It was just too much. So instead, I'm just going to play you a short soundbite. So the context, the challenge that we'd 20 minutes working on existing bits of corporate copy and weave in the new narrative, building a story around it. So we did this with some intranet copy, a press release, some NHS jobs copy, and some other bits and bobs. And each time, because this was all done virtually, obviously, the team were asked to hurriedly find and play a sound every time that they used a bit of the narrative or the key message. So we had everything from guitar strumming to dog whistles going off. What you're about to hear is the group who had been given the chairman's intro to the annual report, which I think we'll all accept is never the most scintillating thing. And they used some artistic license on the voiceover and turned up with a surprise trombone. So I'll just play you a snip of this recording.
I am very proud of the expertise, commitment, and flexibility shared by our teams and our partners as we work together to develop vital solutions at an unprecedented pace while insisting on the highest standards of usability, privacy, and security. The past few months have demonstrated beyond any doubt that we can produce products that solve problems and reduce complexity for the front line. I thank you.
Still makes us laugh anyway. And of course, it being us, we did make some obligatory tromboning gags. Anyway, it was a fun session and a good reminder that if you want people to buy into something, then don't be afraid to have a bit of fun with it. Make it memorable, be a bit creative, get them engaged. Anyway, back to you, Andy.
Cheers. Now, getting our team using our narrative was one thing. Getting others to was a whole different ballgame. I think we can probably agree that comms folk can be a bit, well, controlling, but it was important to us that we relinquish some of that control and get other people in our organisation to put our narratives to good work. I know you can't read this slide, and we're not expecting you to in some kind of attempt of a weird Zoom eye test or something. This is just a visual example of a blog from our former Director of User Design, Matt Edgar. Jude and I didn't see this piece or interfere with it until it was published by Matt. But when it was, I was delighted I could play key message bingo with it. So as I read through it, I found myself going, I'm not going to do a trombone noise, by the way, ping, 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 every time I spotted a key message. Matt demonstrated how you can weave key messages into something while still retaining your own voice and creativity. And it's this that builds a consistent strategic narrative.
So we've let you into the secret of how we've been developing our narratives, and you're going to recognise this slide from earlier. And I make no apologies for including it again. It's one of the biggest things we've taken away from our narrative work. So as a refresher, the reason to start with why is that it taps into the limbic part of your brain that's wired for emotion. And this is the same bit of the brain that also controls behaviors. So if your audience can resonate with your why, then they're more likely to think, feel, or do as you want them to. So this technique is particularly useful for campaigns and any kind of like behavioral work. But it's also an incredible way to quickly and easily transform a piece of copy, however mundane, just by starting with the why. And it doesn't take long. It's a creative top tip that you can hopefully quickly put into practice. So as a reminder, the principle is that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And a great place to start is with your About Us descriptions. So I had a bit of a trawl through quite a few public sector About Us pages on websites. And on the most part, they rarely start with why. They go straight on into the what, and they don't even usually talk about the how. And yet it can make the hugest difference. So rather than pick on public sector websites, because I thought that was really, really rubbish thing for us to do, we are going to use a few fictional examples. So I'm going to need my trusty, funny sidekick for this. You ready, Andy?
Ready.
Right. We are in that fictional, well-known place of Anytown, and Andy here is Anytown's finest creative copywriter, right?
Right.
Okay, then let's describe some of our key public services in Anytown. We're going to start with the fire service, please, Andy.
Okay. Anytown Fire Service is an independent body with a legal duty to provide a fire and rescue service.
Oh, God. Can you now try starting with why?
What? Okay. We believe the people of Anytown should be kept safe.
It's much better, thank you. Let's move on to Anytown Housing, please.
Oh, I've got this. Anytown Housing is a social housing provider with over 26,000 houses for the people of Anytown.
Can you start with why?
Huh? Okay. Everyone in Anytown deserves a place to call home.
Okay. And finally then, the local specialist NHS trust, please.
Easy. Anytown NHS Trust provides specialist NHS mental health and learning disability services.
Okay, Andy, you can do better. Could you start with why, please?
Oh, yeah. We're here to help people reach their potential and live well in their community.
Please forgive our silliness with this. Feel sorry for our colleagues. We're pretty much like this all the time. Feel sorry for our kids. That's clearly where Andy's voice has come from. But hopefully it's given you a memorable and slightly fun example of how you could try starting with why. And the other thing that Andy and I are known for and slightly obsessed with now is hitting 27 words. In fact, I even carefully wrote his Christmas card to make sure it was exactly 27 words, because that's kind of what passed for fun.
Yeah, but remember when we went to Ellen Road, the Leeds United ground, for my COVID vaccine? Oh, by the way, a shout out to Peter Miller from my team, who's joining us today from the queue in a jab centre in Ellesmere Port. Good luck, Peter. Anyway, back to my jab story. I sent a photo of me next to a protest banner against the European Super League, if you remember that ridiculous idea. There were so many words on it, and they really could have done to get it down to 27. But as a diehard Man United fan, season ticket holder, and author of extraordinaire of books about Man United, I won't be offering my copywriting skills anytime soon to Leeds United.
You finished? Can you
Sorry, that rude interruption.
Stop trying to bring football into it. This is what I have to work with, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, the art of getting 3 messages into a 27-word or thereabouts sentence is really worth practicing with your staff. Particularly with those staff who love long, convoluted descriptions. I think we all could probably call out who those are straight off. Anyway, We've been using this method with our NHS Digital programs when we've been running value proposition workshops with them. So getting them to boil down their why, their how, and their what, not only into the right order, but also into just 27 words. So as an example, here is an old version of the NHS Digital About Us one-liner. So I think you can see there's plenty of what. Don't know if there's a little bit of how, but there's absolutely no why. And then here is our strategic narrative version. So I'm hoping you can spot the difference. So you can see we begin with why, we go on to the how, and then we give the what. Just a quick side note from Andy and I that please don't judge us on our online presence. It's a work in progress with our narrative. COVID's kind of got in the way, blah, blah, blah. But we did manage to get our social media assets updated, as you can see here, with the nice, clear, improving lives with data and technology.
Okay. Now, when we were prepping this session, we did think about trying to do some kind of live edit of one of your About Us sections via the chat box or a fancy whiteboard app. But we quickly realised this could be disastrous. And just because we work for NHS Digital, it doesn't actually mean we're digital whizzes ourselves, far from it. But hopefully, you may want to give these tips and tricks a try. Please tweet us if you do. We'd really love to know how you get on. And also, if you find yourself getting stuck, feel free to drop us a message and we'll try to help out.
So we're conscious of time, so we're going to wrap up. So there's some time for questions, and also probably because you're sick of our double act and us rambling on. But, I think I'm sick of it anyway. Hopefully we've shown you a little bit of the art and the science of how we've approached some of the comms at NHS Digital. This image, by the way, was Andy's choice because it shows the brown and the green segments on Trivial Pursuit, which I'm reliably informed relates to the art and the science questions. By the way, Andy is incredible on a quiz team because he's clearly spent a lot of time playing Jude. So it's probably no wonder we never met at uni. Clearly too busy drinking. But anyway, the art and science of narratives, back on topic. It's really great to work with our internal teams on this. And I think it's helped them appreciate how and where comms can add value and to further our reputation as a strategic comms discipline. So one note when developing key messages and narratives, they're just structures. They're structures for you to build upon. The creativity comes in with how you use your structure, your framework, your key message grid, whatever you want to call it. You've got to then be able to bring those stories to life, to really make them memorable, make them stick, and make them resonate.
Which nicely brings us back to where we began, with storytelling. What we've shown you today won't work for everyone. It's just a method we've developed between us using some models that were already out there. And that's the whole point of creativity, really. Take something, learn from it, develop it, and improve it. It's been fun playing around with process, genuinely. Jude and I had fun with this work. We've laughed a lot. Too often people see creativity as just the resulting output and don't consider the process, which can be fun too. 2793, starting with the why, having a formula. At the end of the day, it all links back to the sheer power of a great story. To infinity and beyond.
That's all, folks. I will stop sharing if anybody's still there.
You know what? Do you know what? Nobody's left the call.
Wrong with you all.
Maybe one person, because they've run off to go and try and get their 27 sorted.
It's probably Peter Miller who's having his jab right now.
I mean, that's a good excuse, isn't it? We'll have a piece of that. That was brilliant. Thanks so much, both. I know we've got lots of questions in the chat that we'll come to in a moment. That's the most chat I've ever seen in a Zoom chat, by the way. Those answers to the movie question flying in was fantastic. I think it's also the first time I've heard use of the word knobhead in a Zoom meeting.
You don't go to the right meeting.
You need to come to more of our meetings, Darren.
I really do.
Yeah, well, Paul Butler, he's going to agree with this. He also gets referred to as knobhead every so often. So.
I've really enjoyed the slight bickering between the two of you as well, because I think that's lovely to see, actually, and you can see the teamwork and the thinking, and as somebody in the chat said, you've thought about the why for today as well, so you've kind of applied it to the day. So we'll launch into questions in a sec. Just one from me, not a question, just a comment, really. How much of a buzz is it when you come up with exactly 27 words for something? How does it feel?
It brings out the complete inner geek in you. It's unbelievable. I mean, the amount of time we spent literally pointing at words and going and counting them up manually. I don't know why we didn't use some kind of tool for doing it, but again, speaks to our digital credentials not being the best. But yeah, it was a absolute brilliant cheap thrill. It was great.
And hyphens are your best friend as well.
Yeah.
The most annoying thing for us is whenever you talk about health. So when you talk about health staff or health services, somebody always says, we should include on social care there. We're like, no, because that's 3 extra words. So we end up saying, yeah, quite a lot, but it does make you a bit, Andy tells me off for saying anal all the time, but it does make you really anal about counting your numbers and counting your messages. But it's an amazing tool when you're in workshops with internal staff who say, just add this, this, and this. And we say, yeah, we can add that. What are you cutting? What is it you want to cut? Is that more important than that? And so whilst it is a bit silly to nail this 27 all the time, it properly gets people to get it, boil it right down.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a cheap thrill.
I think that's brilliant. And I think that, well, there's 2 things there, isn't it? One, you're kind of applying some science to the art. So it's not just your opinion that it's 27 words.
And that's how we sell it. That's how we sell it to these people who use that in their work, in their day-to-day work, these techie people.
Yeah. No, I think that's really important. But the fact that you can bring people in and work with them to develop, your own key messages and stories, because it should be collaborative, shouldn't it? You have to do it with people rather than just comms does it in a silo. So I love all of that. Anyway, I've got one question that came in this morning, which I think is a great question, which I'm just going to ask really quickly. Then I'll pass over to Andy, who's going to go through the chat. So if you haven't posted a question yet, type it into the chat area now with a great big capital Q so it's easy to spot. But a question here from the brilliant Carol Brooker, who I can see on my screen. Hello to Carol. So this is a question for both of you. NHS Comms has really come into its own in recent years, truly excelling in many areas, especially in the past 18 months. Aside from all the usual constraints about NHS and trust comms, is there any aspects of comms you think the NHS has yet to encounter or succeed
That's a good question.
It is.
Yeah, that's a killer question.
In 27 words, please.
Yeah. There's a few ways you can approach that answer, I suppose. I think the one thing the NHS still isn't very good at is that genuine kind of 2-way engagement. We still very much are organisations broadcasting. I think we're still quite scared to be publicly on receipt mode. We hide a lot behind patient confidentiality, and obviously there are a lot of reasons why you can't engage with somebody about their care, but if they want to talk wider about reorganisation of hospital services, we should do that in a public forum. I think some trusts are getting a lot better at that. I think probably it's fair to say that there's still too much control from the centre around that. I think the other challenge probably for NHS Comms will be, my background was in an NHS trust, I was there for a long time, and it was all about how do we differentiate ourselves as a trust? How do we compete with our neighbouring trusts? How do we get people to want to work here and come and get treated here, et cetera, et cetera. And now with the fast forwarding of integrated care systems, where we now have to talk as a place, and you've got trusts that cross several place boundaries, you've got some that are coterminous with local authorities. So how do you now speak as a place while still retaining your own unique differentiation? Or is that actually going to go, and are we going to see a return to that more kind of like geographical boundary comms. I think that's going to be a really interesting one to watch, and I hope ICSs, there are some brilliant people across the country who are heading up comms in ICSs, and I think it'll be fascinating to see how that one plays out in trusts, and making sure that it's not, say, the big acute hospitals that are dominating the conversation. That's probably quite a boring answer for anybody who's not in NHS land, but of course in ICSs now it also includes local authorities and third sector and all of that. The NHS geek in me has really just come out. Thank you.
Thank you, Jude. I'm going to hand over to Andy Lambert now, because I can see there's a lot of questions in the chat. So Andy, do you want to pull some questions out for Jude and Andy K, as we'll call him?
Yes, yeah, I will do. There's a lot of good ones. So let's start with a simple one. And Andy, Jude, just feel free to chime in, whoever's best to answer this. So Louise asked, how do you test your narratives and evaluate resonance?
Yeah, well, that's something we're actually just about to start the process of doing. We initially set a 3-month deadline for this, and after launching in kind of December last year, we're way overdue, due to many circumstances. But basically, we're gonna test in a very similar kind of way, which is going back to the directorates, which is going back to the individual programs in the first instance, finding out if those messages still count. We've also had our research and insight team do some kind of testing with the public, and with key stakeholder groups, which will kind of ramp up when we actually do our proper review, which keeps getting pushed back at the moment, but is clearly quite an important thing to do. And we are going to be forced into reviewing this because of some organisational changes and some changes at the top of some of our directorates, which means that some of the emphasis, which was in data, for example, is now going to change because the focus of that directorate has changed, and they're also writing a completely new strategy. So we need to in part reflect that. Jude, have you got anything to add to that?
Probably just we're very lucky at NHS Digital that we've got amazing user researchers. We've got such knowledge that we can tap into. So in terms of being able to test how things are landing, we can link it into our metrics, into our analytics, but also talk to our user research community about how they would do it. And one of our narratives we tested with chief information officers, and it was a very technical one. It was all about interoperability and quite long, boring stuff, but we were way off mark. When we tested it with the CCIOs and trusts, they were like, that sounds patronizing, we don't
marketing speak.
Yeah, they were like, this just sounds like marketing speak, and we were kind of there going, well, that's because it is marketing speak.
Yeah.
It landed really badly with them, and then we had to completely shift it on its axis into something different, which was fascinating. And I guess it goes to prove this is why you should invest time in testing your messaging as well. Obviously, there's an element of, but an organisation wants to say this, but actually, if you don't understand what your audience needs to hear, then what you want to say, it's just going to fall flat anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, that was the tension between the kind of aspirational messaging and then the people who actually experience us on the front line, for example, saying, well, you're not there, you're that far away, actually. So it's finding that balance between the two.
So yeah, really interesting answer. But yeah, linked to this, Amy asks, do you use this strategic narrative approach both across internal and external comms? Yes, we do. And our NHS Digital comms team has got a lot of sub-functions within it. Internal comms, I would class as our very best customers. Our messaging is used in every and they do the same thing as I did or Jude and I did with the Matt Edgar blog. They send me through their kind of every output that they have with stuff highlighted in it still. So that goes out in the weekly newsletter. It goes out in the kind of all hands broadcast, which all staff go to. It's in the messaging, which is in our new
new office hub, which we sometimes get to go into occasionally, and hopefully will do in the future. But all of the kind of banners on the walls are all using our words, which is quite another cheap thrill to see when you're walking around the offices.
We're easily excited, aren't we, Andy? I think it's fair to say that.
Yeah.
Internal comms, and we've also we've got a narrative for sustainability as an example. So that kind of cuts across the internal and the external. So there's some sustainability challenges in our organisation at the moment. They're using that narrative. But then when we talk externally about what we're trying to do with the move to like cloud technology and all of this, we also then use that narrative externally. So the two do kind of naturally cross.
Yeah, it's probably important to say there are 7 separate narratives which feed into the main narrative, and there is one for our people, which is used for everything from job ads to the stuff that goes in the staff newsletter.
Love it. Talking about like your narrative and the framework that you've developed, there was a lot of interest in that, and Abim and Joe have also asked us, like, will that framework that you shared on that slide be made available for others to potentially use?
We can. Yeah. Happy to. We'll have a chat with Darren about that, how we do that. But yeah, happy to do that, because they're not our models. We've just put the two together. And I think there is some benefit in using the two separately as well, but actually it's really powerful when you combine the two. So yeah, very happy to share. But if anybody hasn't yet seen the Simon Sinek Golden Circle, I'd start with that as a TED talk. It's really worth your time. And he does a great example of like how Apple do it, and it's great. It's well worth, and it really sticks with your brain as well. Well, it did for me anyway. Obviously made me feel something, which is why I remembered it.
Yeah, definitely agree with that one. Definitely. So and there was a few questions to Paul Butler actually in the chat. So,
nice one, Paul.
Which Paul's been quite kind enough to answer some of them, but I thought it's worthwhile everyone, in case anyone else missed it in the chat, I thought I'd raise it. But yeah, Daniel and Catherine have asked, well, actually App mentioned Paul, but said, like, I'd be really interested to know how you get buy-in from senior leaders. Paul did answer this in the chat, but it'd probably be good to answer this as well, so everyone can hear in case anyone missed.
Unmute yourself, Mr. Butler.
Oh, are you making him answer again?
I am making him answer. Yeah, how have you got buy-in with our
Talk about being called out on the public, eh? No, I can't hide on this one. No, I think, as I put in the chat, I think for us it was running similar sessions to this actually. So we had Jude and Andy both helped out with the sessions. We did a run through of the kind of why, and we started with the why, and it really, really did resonate. You know, we got lots of feedback afterwards, saying just how positive it was. And straight away, we noticed a really significant shift in terms of the way they're approaching the comm support we're providing. And they've now run similar sessions themselves in terms of their kind of corporate objective setting, going back to the why and the work they're doing as well. So it really has made a difference. Not for every single person, it's fair to say, but for the vast majority, certainly has made a difference. So yeah, SLT sessions, just introducing them to the concept really has worked.
The one that sticks with me, Paul, is we did a value proposition workshop with the Child Protection Information Service.
Yeah.
Trying to get them to describe what they did in 27 words, and they started talking about systems talking to each other and raising flags and all of this, and we were like, yeah, but why? They were like, oh, so that you can share information, you can see if it, yeah, but why? And I often say, be the annoying toddler who just keeps going, but why? And finally they just said something as simple as, because we need to keep children safe. And we were like, there you go, that's what it is. And that's how you get busy clinical people to read some copy that comes through to them, because nobody can argue with we need to keep children safe. They don't want to start a piece of copy that says the CPIS service is here to ensure that. It just gets people straight away, and then they will read the really important information that you're trying to tell them.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting framework on that. It's called the 5 Whys, which helps you guide people through that process, or the annoying toddler framework, whatever you want to call it. So, so actually, Paul, whilst you're up on stage, there was another question that you were kind enough to answer. Is that Sheena asked, is there an average word length too, or character count? You had a good answer for that one.
Yeah, I think just read it out loud to yourself. You know, I think just test it. If it sounds too long, too complicated when you're reading it back to yourself, then you've probably not got it quite right. So just replay with the words, either slightly fewer words potentially, or just make the words a bit shorter and a bit more concise. You know, just read it out loud.
And this is coming from very good authority. Paul's background is in journalism, so he knows a thing or two about writing as well, I think it's fair to say.
Love it, love it. Well, conscious of people's time, let's probably call an end to the questions. And Darren, back over to you, mate.
Brilliant, thank you, Andy, and thanks to Paul Butler. Paul, he was sat there, you know, thinking about lunch and having a coffee, and he's been pulled into action. So thank you to Paul for stepping in. That was great to hear. Yeah, we're on time. Who'd have thought? Who'd have thought, Jude and Andy, you could get this all in on time? It's incredible. So you've been living the brand of keeping it short. So that's been fantastic.
Well, it's because you got Paul to answer the last two questions. Otherwise, we'd have still been talking.
Very true. Well done, Paul. But no, on a serious note, I've genuinely really loved today. I've scribbled down some thoughts and some notes. I'm sure everybody has. It's been fantastic to hear from you. Yeah, we will make the recording and the slides if Jude and Andy are okay with that. We'll put those onto the Comms 2.0 website. I've created a little new section under the toolbox called Catch Up TV, so I'll put everything in there. Yeah, some brilliant ideas that I think are really practical, and you can go away and work with colleagues. And I think many teams aren't there at that stage now where we're into this next phase of living with COVID. And I think a lot of organisations' narratives need work, you know, to move us on to, you know, the second half of 2021 and into next year. So I think there's been some brilliant tips and tools and techniques on the show today. So thank you very, very much to Jude, to Andy and to Paul for stepping into the breach today. Really loved hearing your stories. And I suppose on a broader note, just thanks for the job that you've been doing over the past 15 months, because you have done some vitally important work, you know, is an understatement, but you really, really have. So on behalf of everybody on the call, thanks for all the brilliant work that you've been doing behind the scenes and the countless hours that the comms people have been putting in. It's very much appreciated. So, you know, the industry says thank you to you. Just before you go, yeah, I will send this all out on email, but for Creativity Lab 4 or 5, we want you on the call to be the stars. So what we're really looking for is perhaps some people that we've never heard of before, whose work we've never seen before, to shine a bit of a light on maybe some unsung heroes that are out there doing brilliant work. So I'll put it into the email that comes out to you all, but don't be shy. Send us some examples of work that you're most proud of from the past 15 months. And we want you to be the stars of Creativity Lab 4 or 5. We might do both, actually, so we'll see what comes in. Some people have submitted already, but if you've got great work that you're really proud of, send it to us, and we're going to have a good mooch through, and we're going to have some thoughts about how we showcase you and your work in future editions of Creativity Lab. So on that, it's 1:01. We're on time. I'm starving, so I'm going to get a sandwich and another coffee. Thank you, everybody, for joining in today. I hope you found it useful and fun. And once again, thanks very much to Jude and Andy. Round of applause. Go eat.
Thanks, Darren. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thanks all. See you again soon. Bye.
Yeah. See you later.